I never minded staying in the background. It suited me. Letting Vanessa take center stage while I remained in the shadows had always been a conscious choice, not a weakness. I watched as she climbed the corporate ladder, basking in the praise of colleagues who admired her drive and determination. She carried herself like a queen, confident that every step she took was her own. But I knew the truth. Every job offer, every promotion, every high-profile project, none of it had happened by chance. It was me. I was the architect behind her success, the unseen force that ensured her rise. She believed she had conquered the business world through sheer talent, unaware that I had placed the stepping stones beneath her feet. Vanessa worked for a prestigious marketing firm, one that I owned. She thought her manager, Daniel, was the one making the big decisions, the one who saw potential in her and pushed her forward. But Daniel wasn't just her boss. He was my employee, a trusted associate who followed my instructions to the letter. He was the one who had guided her career, who had given her the promotions I approved, the bonuses I authorized, and the luxurious benefits I ensured she received. Of course, I never told her. Vanessa prided herself on being independent, on being a self-made woman. She would have hated knowing the truth, that without me, she would still be struggling in an entry-level position. I had met Vanessa years ago at a networking event. She had been captivating, full of energy and ambition, the kind of woman who demanded attention the moment she entered a room. I had been drawn to that fire, that confidence. At the time, I believed she would appreciate a man who supported her, who quietly ensured her dreams became reality. I was wrong. At first, our marriage had been good, at least I thought so. I provided, I listened, I gave her space to thrive. But over the years, something changed. Vanessa became consumed with status, with power. The more she succeeded, the less she seemed to respect me. I was no longer the man she had once adored. I was merely an accessory, a quiet presence in the background of her shining life. And then came the night that changed everything. It was a family dinner at her parents' house, one of those lavish gatherings where everyone flaunted their success. Vanessa's family was well off, but they were also deeply competitive. Every conversation was a battle for dominance. Who had the best career, the most expensive car, the most luxurious vacations? I had always stayed quiet, letting Vanessa handle the social politics. But that night, she went too far. We were halfway through dinner when the topic of career success came up. Vanessa was in her element, boasting about her latest achievements, soaking in the admiration of her family. I listened, as I always did, until her mother turned to me. "And what about you, Robert?" she asked, her tone polite but uninterested. "How's work?" I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, Vanessa laughed. A sharp, mocking laugh that cut through the room. "Robert? Work?" she scoffed. "Please, he just drifts along. If it weren't for me, I don't even know what he'd be doing with his life." The room went silent. My grip tightened around my fork, but I didn't say a word. She wasn't finished. "You know, Robert is good for nothing," she continued, shaking her head. "Who even brought you here?" "Oh wait, I did. If it weren't for me, you'd be a nobody." Laughter rippled through the table. Some of her family members chuckled uncomfortably, while others simply watched, waiting for my reaction. I didn't give them one. I looked at Vanessa, really looked at her. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built an empire for, was sneering at me like I was beneath her, like I was nothing. I put down my fork, wiped my mouth with my napkin, and slowly stood up. "Excuse me," I said, my voice calm, controlled, and then I walked away. I didn't argue. I didn't try to defend myself. I simply left. Vanessa didn't follow me. No one did. They had no idea that the man they had just humiliated was the one holding the strings. But they were about to find out. Because that night, I made a decision. Vanessa would learn exactly who she had underestimated. I walked out of that house without looking back, stepping into the cool night air with an eerie sense of calm. The streetlights cast long shadows along the pavement as I made my way to my car, my mind quiet, my pulse steady. Not a single person had called after me. Not Vanessa, not her parents, not even the friends and distant relatives who had laughed at my humiliation. I slid into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel. A deep breath in, a slow exhale. I wasn't angry, not in the way most men would have been. There was no urge to yell or demand an apology. No impulse to defend myself. No, what I felt was something far more powerful. Clarity. For years, I had lived in the background of Vanessa's carefully curated life, making sure she had everything she needed to thrive. Every opportunity, every financial advantage, every safety net. Those had been my silent gifts. I had let her believe she had done it all on her own because I thought that's what love was. But love isn't meant to be repaid with public humiliation. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine humming to life. Vanessa thought she had built her success, that without her, I was nothing, that I was a shadow of a man, someone to tolerate at best and ridicule at worst. She had no idea. She had no idea that the car I was driving, the house we lived in, the very job she bragged about at that dinner table, all of it had come from me. She had no idea that her manager, Daniel, the man she respected so much, was on my payroll and followed my instructions to the letter. She had no idea that every credit card with her name on it was funded by accounts I controlled. She had no idea that I owned the company she worked for. And now, she was about to learn the cost of mistaking silence for weakness. I didn't go home. Home was no longer a place I belonged. It was just a house, a beautiful one, sure, but now it felt like a stage Vanessa used to play the role of the accomplished career woman with the perfect, quiet husband in the background. Instead, I drove to a high-rise apartment in the city, one Vanessa didn't know about, a place I had kept for business trips, though I rarely used it. I parked in the underground garage, took the private elevator to the penthouse, and stepped inside. The space was sleek and modern, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city skyline. I loosened my tie, poured myself a glass of whiskey, and sank into the leather chair by the window. For the first time in years, I felt weightless. I pulled out my phone. There were no calls, no messages. I wasn't surprised. Vanessa likely expected me to return on my own, tail between my legs, like I always did when she threw one of her tantrums. But not this time. This time, I would let her feel my absence. I placed the glass down and opened a secure banking app. With a few taps, I began systematically cutting off her access to funds. Her credit cards? Frozen. The private investment account she had been so proud of? Disabled. The emergency fund she thought was hers alone? Transferred. I wasn't leaving her with nothing, at least, not yet. She still had her salary. But Vanessa had grown accustomed to luxury, to convenience. She had no idea how much of her life was held up by invisible threads I had woven around her. And I was about to cut every single one of them. Still no calls. No messages. I smiled to myself and took another sip of whiskey. The night was just beginning. I knew Vanessa wouldn't panic right away. The first day, she probably sat in our house. Her house, as she always called it, without a care in the world. She likely assumed I was sulking, licking my wounds, waiting for her to decide when she was ready to talk. Vanessa had always believed that she controlled the dynamic of our marriage. I let her believe it. It amused me, in a way, how she convinced herself that she held the power, when in reality, I had been the one orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. On the second day, she would have started to feel annoyed. Maybe she texted me. Something short, something dismissive. Are you done being dramatic? Perhaps she even rolled her eyes as she typed it, confident that at any moment, I'd walk through the door, apologize for leaving, and take whatever insult she decided to throw next. But when I didn't respond, irritation would have turned into frustration. By the third day, things took a turn. Vanessa wasn't used to being ignored, and she certainly wasn't used to being inconvenienced. That was when she tried using her credit cards. Declined. She would have assumed it was a glitch at first. Maybe she tried another card. Declined again. She probably tried to transfer money from her checking account. Frozen. And that was when the panic set in. I imagined her pacing the living room, phone in hand, her fingers trembling as she dialed customer service. I knew exactly what they would tell her, polite but firm responses about security holds and account ownership. None of it would make sense to her, not yet. She still believed she was in control. That illusion shattered when she called her boss. I wasn't there to see her face when Daniel told her the truth, but I almost wished I had been. Vanessa, I don't actually run this company. Robert does. I pictured the blood draining from her face, her breath catching in her throat. The realization would have hit her all at once, sharp and merciless. The career she had built? It had been my doing. The promotions? My decisions. The salary she had bragged about? My generosity. The woman who had stood at that dinner table and mocked me, who had called me good for nothing in front of her family, was now learning just how much everything in her life had depended on me. And she had no idea where I was. By the end of the third day, my phone was flooded with missed calls and unread messages. I sat in my penthouse, watching the city lights flicker beyond the glass, sipping my whiskey as the notifications piled up. At first, the messages were demanding. Robert, stop being childish. Call me back. Then they turned irritated. Enough, Robert. This isn't funny. What did you do to my accounts? By the evening, the tone shifted. I don't know what's going on, but please just talk to me. I let her stew in silence. On the fourth day, Vanessa went to work as usual, hoping, praying, that maybe, just maybe, this was all a misunderstanding. She stepped into her office, her usual confidence flickering like a candle in the wind. But the moment she sat down, Daniel walked in. Vanessa, I'm sorry, but we have to let you go. Her breath hitched. What? Your position was always at Robert's discretion. And well, he's made it clear that your employment is no longer required. Fired. She had never been fired before. She had never even considered that it was possible. Vanessa stormed out of the office, her hands shaking as she called me again. Straight to voicemail. She tried my email. No response. She called my assistant. Nothing. I had erased myself from her world. By the end of the week, she had nothing left. No job, no money, no access to the life she had flaunted so arrogantly. And when she finally broke down and went to her parents, hoping for support, she found that even they were unwilling to help. After all, they had witnessed her humiliate me at that dinner. They had laughed right along with her. Now, there was nothing left to laugh about. Vanessa had built her life on a foundation she thought was unshakable. She never realized that the foundation was me, and I had just removed it. I knew she would come. Vanessa had exhausted every other option. Her accounts were frozen, her job was gone, and her parents, who had once adored her confidence, now viewed her as a source of shame. She had burned every bridge, and now she stood at the last one she had left. Mine. I watched from the security monitors as she arrived at my office building, looking nothing like the woman who had once held her head so high. Her hair was unkempt, her designer dress wrinkled. Probably the last expensive outfit she still had access to. She tried walking past security, but they stopped her. I need to see Robert Carter, she snapped, trying to muster what was left of her pride. Do you have an appointment, ma'am? The receptionist asked politely. An appointment? I'm his wife, she nearly screamed. Ex-wife, actually, the receptionist corrected smoothly. The look on Vanessa's face at that moment was priceless. I could see her hands trembling, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. She must have felt the weight of what that meant, of how far removed from my world she had become in just a matter of days. But desperation makes people persistent. She argued. She pleaded. She even cried. Eventually, after watching her degrade herself for almost an hour, I instructed my assistant to let her through. It was time. She walked into my office hesitantly, her movements slow, as if she was stepping into the den of a predator. I let the silence stretch between us as I sat behind my desk, perfectly composed. Gone was the woman who had mocked me in front of her family. The arrogance, the confidence, the dismissiveness. It had all crumbled. "Robert, please?" Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean what I said. You know how I get when I drink. I was just joking." I tilted my head slightly, as if considering her words. She took a step forward. "I was drunk, Robert. I wasn't thinking. You know I never meant to hurt you." I said nothing. I just let the silence sink in, watched as she grew more frantic with each passing second. Her eyes darted around the office, taking in the things she had never known about. The plaques on the wall, the awards, the sheer power that radiated from the room. My room. Not hers. Not anymore. "Robert, please," she whispered, fresh tears slipping down her face. "I love you." I exhaled slowly and leaned back in my chair, studying her. "You love me?" I repeated, my voice even. She nodded quickly. "Of course I do." I let out a quiet chuckle, one that held no warmth. "You love the lifestyle I gave you," I corrected her. "Not me." Her face crumpled. "That's not true." I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto hers, cutting through every pathetic lie she was about to spew. "I spent years giving you everything," I said, my tone cold and sharp. "I made sure you never had to struggle. I built you up, supported you in ways you never even realized. And how did you repay me? By humiliating me. By reducing me to nothing in front of your family." She shook her head violently. "No, no, Robert, I didn't mean—" "You showed me exactly how much I meant to you that night," I continued, my voice unwavering. "So now, I'm showing you exactly what you mean to me." I reached into my desk and pulled out the folder, sliding it across the table towards her. "Divorce papers." She froze, staring at them as if they were a death sentence. Her hands trembled as she reached for the folder, flipping it open with a sharp intake of breath. "Robert, no," she whispered, her voice thick with desperation. I stood up, buttoning my suit jacket, adjusting my cuffs as if this moment meant nothing to me. Because it didn't. Not anymore. "Sign them," I said simply, "and be grateful I didn't take more from you." Her head snapped up, fresh panic in her eyes. "You can't do this. Please, Robert. I love you." I smirked. "You don't even know what love is." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she reached for me, as if touching me would somehow bring back the version of me that had once cared. The man who had tolerated her arrogance. That man was dead. I stepped back, out of her reach. "Goodbye, Vanessa." And without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving her broken, desperate, and completely powerless. I never looked back. The moment I walked out of that office, I left Vanessa behind. Not just physically, but in every possible way. She was no longer a part of my life, no longer a thought that occupied my mind. She had chosen to humiliate me, to diminish me in front of her family as if I were nothing. So, I became nothing to her, and she became nothing to me. The divorce was finalized within weeks. I made sure of it. There were no lengthy court battles, no drawn-out negotiations. She signed the papers without a fight, because she had no choice. Without me, she had no job, no money, no resources. She had burned every bridge that could have saved her. I heard things, of course. People talked. Vanessa tried to rebuild her life, but the foundation she thought she had was gone. Her family, the same ones who had laughed at my expense, distanced themselves once they realized she had nothing to offer. She applied for jobs, only to realize that the industry she thrived in was one I controlled. No company of value would touch her. She moved into a small apartment, far from the luxury she was used to. The glamorous parties, the expensive dinners, the designer lifestyle. It all faded into a memory she could no longer afford. And she regretted it. Every single day. I knew because she tried to contact me. Calls, messages, emails, all ignored. She even sent letters. Handwritten letters. Apologies. Desperate pleas. I never responded. Not because I hated her. Not because I wanted revenge. But because she was no longer worth my time. I had a new life to live, and I was going to live it fully, without her. The last time I ever saw Vanessa was purely by accident. Months had passed, and I was walking into a high-end restaurant with a few business associates when I spotted her. She was sitting alone at the bar, a half-empty glass in front of her, wearing the same dress she had worn the night she humiliated me. Only this time, she wasn't laughing. She wasn't surrounded by admirers. She wasn't basking in attention. She was just there, alone. She must have felt my presence because she turned. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and in that instant, I saw everything. The regret, the pain, the realization of what she had lost. She opened her mouth as if to say something, maybe to apologize again, maybe to beg, but I didn't give her the chance. I simply turned away, walked past her, and never looked back. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. What did you think of Robert's decision? Was it justified, or did Vanessa deserve a second chance? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful tales. See you in the next one.